Good afternoon. This is Blumenthal. I am your virtual scholar in residence, and with the indulgence of Emor I have been asked to give a Dvar Torah, an insight into this week's Parshat. At the end of this week's Parshat, Parshat Emor, there's a very enigmatic story about a feud, a fight that broke out between the son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man and an Israelite man. And in the course of this altercation, the former cursed God. And it seems that Moshe and the Jews were not sure what to do. So God comes down and commands them what to do. Hashem says to Moshe, take the blasphemer out of the camp. And the witnesses shall do smicha, shall put their hands on his head, or literally lean on him. And then the entire nation will execute him, will stone him to death. And the obvious question is, what is this smicha? What is this leaning, putting the hands on the head of the criminal? So Rashi quotes the Torah Kohanim and explains, they say to him, your blood is on your own head, as you have brought this upon yourself. So they're sort of telling him, we're putting your hands on your head to say, you caused this. But again, why are we doing this? What's the purpose or function? Why only here? So Samson Fall Hirsch points out that there are 5 occasions in the Torah where there is smicha, where there is this place in the hand that had leaning on the other one. One of the most famous is when Moshe hands the mantle of leadership over to Yoshua. He does smicha, and perhaps that's where we have the notion of smicha being rabbinical ordination. The other time is when the Jewish people designate the Levites, to represent them in the Mishkan, in the Beit HaMikdash. So they lean their hands on the Leviim to give them over that leadership role. The other time is when someone brings a sin offering. They lean on the animal as if to hand over their sins, to transmit their sins to the animal. And there's also when the Kohen Gadol picks the Ezel Azazel, the scapegoat, the goat that is thrown over the cliff. Again, does smicha, as if to give over the sins of the Jewish people to this animal. And then in this case as well, that the witnesses are handing over to the blasphemer this the responsibility for the action that he took. And he goes on to explain with Hirsch that it's really reciprocal. When Moshe hands the leadership over to Yoshua, Yeshua accepts it. When the Jews hand the role over to the Leviim, they accept it. It's a reciprocal. Similarly, in the way that the animal, when they do smicha on the animal sort of absorbs the sins. And here too, the blasphemer sort of accepts it and accepts responsibility and frees up, if you will, the witnesses from responsibility for this sin. But again, why? Why do we need it here and no place else? So the Chizkuni, which is one of the early commentators, lived at the time of the Balei Tosafot, believe it was around the 13th century. He has an interesting explanation that the witnesses, when they go to Beit Din, when they go to court, and they have to testify about the cursing, they have to say over the curse. So it appears as if they're cursing God too. So therefore they have to do this smicha, they have to sort of hand the curse over back to the blasphemer and say, this is yours, it's not ours. And that's why you have to be punished, and that's why we are free. But again, it still doesn't sort of make sense, because everybody knows they're just testifying. And when they go to court, they don't mean to curse God. Why do they have to go through this whole intense interpersonal ritual as if to hand the sin over back to the blasphemer? So I believe there is implicit in the Chizkuni something very human, some factor that is really very true for all of us, which is, at the end of the day, there's a blasphemer in all of us. We all are capable of any sin, of any misdeed. And when we witness something abhorrent, and we witness an immoral behavior, and especially if we have to reiterate it and repeat it and report on it, it resonates with something inside of us. And therefore we have to go through this intense ritual as if to say, this isn't ours, and we don't want to have part of this. And we rid ourselves of it by giving it over back to the sinner. And this is a very important lesson in life for all of us, especially those of us who are out there in the world, who are mingling with society at large, who are reading media and witnessing and seeing all sorts of behaviors, many of which, of course, are maybe even admirable or maybe at least neutral, but some of it is abhorrent. Some of it are behaviors, are actions that run contrary to how we see ourselves, or run contrary to our sense of morality or our sense of who we are as Jews. And we can't just dismiss it. We can't just assume it's not going to affect us. It does touch us. And there's a side inside of all of us that are capable of any sin. And therefore, we have to very consciously and deliberately sort of dissociate ourselves from these sins, much in the way of the smicha on the blasphemer. I remember once a detective telling me that a good detective is really a criminal, because he has to know how to think like a criminal in order to understand the criminal and then ultimately catch him in his crime. It's interesting, there's a body of literature in psychology that's referred to as secondary trauma, sometimes vicarious trauma, which is the trauma that somebody experiences when they witness a trauma or read about a trauma. In other words, let's say there's somebody, God forbid, who's in a vehicular accident. That person's experiencing primary trauma. But the Hatzalah driver who comes to do first aid, or the person who helps him afterwards deal with the trauma, or the person who reads about it in the newspaper is traumatized himself. Because all interpersonal experiences resonate with all of us, and we're affected. And therefore, as I said, we are affected and impacted by trauma. But there's a more recent literature, which is called secondary resilience. That when we witness resilience, when we witness strength, when we witness kindness, when we witness courage, it also touches something inside of us. And in that very nature of Samson Raphael Hirsch describing how it's reciprocal, in those instances we have to internalize it. We have to take it from those great people and make it part of ourselves. During this COVID-19 crisis, we are actually seeing and witnessing a great deal of resilience. We're seeing very heroic figures, whether it is the Hatzalah drivers, whether it is the health workers who are jeopardizing their health and their well-being for the sake and well-being of others. In Ohel, we're very aware of many of our workers in our homes who are attending to adults who cannot take care of themselves. And even the height of this illness had to go, jeopardize their health, potentially. Some actually did get sick to care for these people. And this great heroism. We're seeing a whole lot of creativity, very imaginative ways in which people are staying in touch, are keeping themselves busy and stimulated while confined to their homes. A lot of amazing kind of activities for our children. So this long day home from school doesn't seem endless. We're seeing a lot of kindness, people extending themselves to others. And we have to do smicha. We have to resonate with it and take it and internalize it so that it becomes part of us and that we emerge from this the better people. My mother, Allah Shalom, was a survivor of 7 concentration camps. And for many years she didn't talk about what she went through, and ultimately she started talking. But ultimately we were able to convince her, prevail upon her, to give one of those video testimonies. And my mother was this brilliant woman, spoke like 7 languages. And she's talking about all her experiences in a pretty matter-of-fact way, not terribly emotional. She described the encroachment of the Nazis to her down, their escape, how the Nazis ultimately caught up with them, their life in the ghetto with all the starvation and privation. She described her ultimate deportation to Theresen, or Theresienstadt as she called it, and ultimately her deportation to Auschwitz. And all along describing it without much emotion. But it was towards the beginning of her description of Auschwitz that she finally broke down. And it was the following story. She described how they tattooed the number on her arm. And while they were inscribing that number on her arm in this terribly inhumane fashion, there was this horrible Nazi, a brutal Nazi there. And by his side was this exceptionally beautiful Jewish woman, well-clothed, well-fed, whose good fortune was obviously of dubious cause. And as they were inscribing this number on her arm, this woman bent down and said to my mother, "When you get freed, you'll buy a big bracelet and cover it up." And my mother turned to her and said, "And you'll get freed too." And the woman nodded and prophetically said, "No, I won't." And at that point, my mother broke down and started to cry. And of course, the interviewer waited as she sobbed. And finally, she composed herself, and she's still sobbing a little bit. And she's clutching a whole bunch of tissues. And she says to the interviewer, I'm not crying over the cruelty. I'm crying over the kindness. There's a lot we have to cry about during this COVID-19. The threat, the danger, disrupted lives, peoples whose weddings, bar mitzvahs, graduations have been canceled. The losses, the unbearable losses in the absence of opportunities to commemorate these losses. But there's also, there's a lot about kindness and a lot of resilience that we have to resonate with as well. We have to do smicha with it. And hopefully in this fashion, we will learn to become better people and emerge from these tragic times somewhat more resilient and somewhat stronger. Thank you for listening. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and hope you have a meaningful Shabbat.